Welcome back to the weekly Chinuch Hashkafa message. We in Australia had a big summer. We've taken a break, but we're back now, hopefully to continue on these weekly messages. But what I'm going to do going forward, hopefully, is to be a bit more strategic about it and focus on specific topics and connect them somewhat to the Parsha. So in a way, it's for parents to understand themselves, but also to have a way through the Parsha to discuss these ideas with their children, particularly in the Shabbos table or with a walk, and so on and so forth. So the topic for this week is the idea of instilling the importance of Kabbalah's oil. It's a bit of a confusing topic nowadays, unfortunately, but really it's one of the yesodis, one of the foundations of Chinuch, one of the foundations of us as Jewish people, as Yidden. We know that we got the Torah, Na'aseh v'nishma. We had this ability to surrender to Hashem and do His mitzvahs even without understanding. Part of the mitzvahs of the Torah are chukim. We just need to do it. Not always we need to understand. Not always we need to process the whole information. We need to do things even though maybe we don't want to do them, or we don't understand them, or even if it's uncomfortable. And this is a concept which can be discussed in this week's Parsha in a number of different ways, and we're going to go through them just very bekitzur. We know that one of the things this week's Parsha, of course, is the Big Day Kahuna. Parsha Tetzaveh, the Big Day Kahuna. And there's a famous Sefer HaChinuch about the purpose of these Kohanim garments. Some of them were very heavy. The Avenate, for example, it's a fascinating detail to discuss with children, was 32 amos long. It's about 16 meters, going all around the body, being very, very heavy. And some of the other begodim as well, which all had to be worn when they were doing the Avodah. And the Sefer HaChinuch famously quotes a principle, Odom nifal kefi ma'asov, that a person is influenced by their action. In other words, that because Hashem wanted the Kohanim to have a certain focus and to feel a certain derech eretz and a certain kedusha around the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, even if they weren't there naturally, even if they would do the avodah, maybe not naturally have that focus they were supposed to have, but by wearing these special beautiful clothing, and especially the heaviness and the beauty that they came with, it would then influence the way they feel. Like the concept of Achar HaMaisim Nimshach HaLavovos. In other words, sometimes we need to understand, and this is something we could discuss with children, that not always you have to feel like doing what you need to do. You just need to do it because it's the right thing to do. And as children go up in a positive way and not in a harsh and negative and toxic way, of course, there are ways to do it. Now this is not the discussion, but we mustn't be scared to explain to children that this is what's expected of them as well, that sometimes when Tati or Mami asks them to do things, that's their training. You just need to do it. There's the famous story, an amazing story, of the previous Rebbe, which as a child he once ate something, and his father asked him if he made a bracha, and he said yes, and his father said you have to make another bracha. And he was very upset because how can you make another bracha? And essentially the nakuda, the point of the story was that if your father asks you to make a bracha, you need to make the bracha. This is not the place to go into the whole explanation of the story, but this is the point of the story. Connected to something else, which is so important, the beginning of the Parsha, where Moshe Rabbeinu is commanded to bring oil for the lighting of the menorah, and of course, the famous expression that the Torah uses is kosis lamoir. So here's the word we can, for ourselves and to share with our children. The beautiful light that came on the menorah, was shining with the menorah, came from olive oil, and olive oil is made by kosis lamoir. Sometimes the olive, or not sometimes, always, the olive needs to be crushed in order to produce the oil. The lesson perhaps we need to know that to produce something beautiful, to produce something holy, it is okay to feel uncomfortable. Adrabah, sometimes dafke, it comes through feeling uncomfortable. We need to grow up as people that are not scared to be uncomfortable. Yes, sometimes the mitzvah is uncomfortable, but it's worth the effort. What can be better than doing a mitzvah? What can be better than having the light of the menorah? What can be better than putting on tefillin, than making kiddush, than keeping Shabbos, eating matzah? Whatever the case is, do they come with effort? Yes. Is the effort sometimes uncomfortable? That's fine. And that's okay. That's okay to highlight, even if it's difficult. That's all part of the concept of instilling in ourselves and in our children the importance of Kabbalah's oil, the importance of doing that which is uncomfortable, doing that which we don't understand, doing that which is sometimes just doesn't sit well with us or we don't like to do it. Now, of course, step 2, that's why Hashem gave us mishpatim as well. Step 2 is, of course, we have to learn. And of course, we have to understand as much as we possibly can. And understanding adds a level of gishmak, adds a level of simcha, and so on and so forth. But that's not the foundation. The foundation is naseh and nishma. Nishma is important, but naseh comes first. Now, in discussing this with our children, the obvious question we have to ask ourselves as parents is, do we show an example of this? Do we show how sometimes we are willing, happily, to do things that are hard for us, or do we try and get out of it? Just because something is uncomfortable, do we try to look for every heter in the book? Or just because something is uncomfortable, do we try and get out of it, or maybe ignore it even though we know it's important? So this is something we need to ask ourselves, are we really setting an example of showing a simcha, showing a joy, showing a willingness to do something just because it's the right thing to do, even though it might be difficult, exercising our own Kabbalas oil, showing an example to our children. So that's a value which we need to think about, but it's also a discussion to be had around the Parsha of the week. Have a good day and a good Shabbos.